Morning, everyone. Hope you had a great Christmas and Happy New Year. It's a shame we're not back in school. We're gonna pretty much do what we did during the last lockdown, so we're gonna try and keep going on. We only have a handful of chapters left, so I suppose the sooner we can get through them, the sooner we can start working on exam papers and just practice. Obviously continue with your study. Okay, so we'll talk about the study now in a second. And maybe I'll start with that. Right. So your exams. Your study timetable revision work. So this one here is due Monday the 11th of January 2020 in your class notebook, which is today. Okay, so at some point today you should have in your own personal notebook, you should have your notes on these 3 chapters, and then you should have your answers to these questions. Okay, so it should always be 2 bits. Your notes first, followed by your answers to the questions, and they're due today. So, you should have them done. I mean, the plan was always to have them done for the 11th, so it shouldn't have made a difference whether we were back to school last Wednesday or not, because it was always due for the 11th. So get it done, please. And then over the course of today, it'll take me maybe an hour or 2 to figure out who has what done. But I will then put up the next chapter that we need to do, which is this one here. Okay, so going from the 11th to the 15th of January, chapters 7, 9 and 12 is our next revision. So this one is done. We will check this one for everybody today, and then we're moving on to the next one. So by the end of today, the new revision on chapters 7, 9 and 12 will be up. Okay, and also answers to the previous one. Alright, so that's your revision. I suppose we'll have a quick look in here. The schema work, so this is us coming to the end. We left ecology off because we needed spring, essentially. We need plants and animals, insects to be out and about to make our study of a habitat anyway good. So hopefully we'll get back to school and get that done before or else just after the mocks. We finished chapter 22 before we finished school. That was the endothermic and exothermic one. So we're going to start here on chapter 23. 32 is done. We don't have to do the CBA, so that leaves us with 33, 38 and 42. Okay, so after the chapter that we're going to do today, and we are going to do it in one because, well, I'll explain in a minute, but it's kind of a common sense chapter. We've 3 more chapters. And then that is it. That is the course complete, which is great. So back up here. So it's still in the chemical world, and it's chapter 23. Chapter 23 is environmental impact of materials. So essentially the kind of big takeaway from this chapter and what you'll need for answering exam questions is questions around sustainability. Do you understand what sustainability is? And then more specific questions around the concept of the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. Okay, so the chapter has a lot in it, and it, as in the actual chapter in your book, has an awful lot in, and most of it is not on the specifications and is just not necessary. I've tried to kind of clip it down to what I think is the bare essentials, and even at that, there's probably too much in this. So there's not going to be homework on this. So essentially, you need to take down your notes, and you can use this evening and tomorrow, whatever, up until our next class, to be working on your revision. Okay, so there definitely won't be homework on this one, because like I said, most of the questions, even if I didn't teach you this chapter, you would probably be able to answer. Alright. I don't know, is there any... No, we won't. We'll talk about how to kind of put up homework when I'm giving you homework, I suppose, but it's all going to be done on OneNote. I'm going to email you. You'll receive this link by email, and when you do have homework, your homework will go down here. Oh, sorry. Into your folders. So Alex's folder is open there, so your homework would go in here. Okay? But like I said, no homework today, so it'll only be your revision document that you're working on. Okay, so I suppose the first part here, what impact do materials have on the environment? This is what it goes on about here is the real reason why we need to reduce, reuse, recycle. Okay, because in order to have a product, any product really, when we receive it, when we, I don't know, go to Power City and buy a toaster, in order to build that toaster, it went through an awful lot of manufacture. Like, there's kind of 5 stages of product development, I suppose. I mean, a lot of the time there are some raw materials that need to be extracted, so that will involve some kind of mining or cutting down trees or distilling crude oil to get the plastic, or so there's always some kind of real to get the base materials that are required. Normally then there's a couple of transportation phases, so you have to transport the raw materials to the factory to actually build the product, and then once it's built you normally have to transport it from there out to however many stores are going to stock the product. The manufacturer itself, so when you transport the raw material to the factory and it's been built, you know, essentially what I'm saying is that at every point, in order to end up with your finished toaster, at every point there's a huge amount of energy used, and a lot of the time a huge amount of pollution caused, whether it's the mining or it's the transportation or it's, you know, in order for the people to work in the factory needs to have the lights on, it needs to have the heating on, and the machines themselves need to be powered. Depending on what they're manufacturing, they might be spitting off harmful chemicals into the atmosphere. So all of these issues basically then you're affecting the earth and the climate, and the even on a very small scale sometimes like an ecosystem, and then you end up with your toaster. So I suppose if you keep your toaster for 5 months and then that toaster gets thrown in the bin and you go and buy a new toaster, then within reason a lot of that was for nothing. So this is, I suppose, where we're coming to the idea of the longer that toaster is used, the more value you get out of it if you're any good with recycling parts of it when it doesn't work as a toaster anymore, but you might be able to take this part and use it for this or whatever. You're basically making that whole process of building it more worthwhile, and all of the pollution that it caused more worthwhile. Okay, so that's kind of what this first chapter here is going on about, the impact of materials on the environment. It talks here about extraction, transportation, manufacture, and how at every point they consume energy and produce carbon dioxide. So then if a material is recycled or reused, the wider impact on the environment is much reduced. Okay, so hopefully that bit makes sense. Sustainability. So this was actually asked on the junior cycle the first year, so it was 2 years ago now, and people really couldn't answer it. So I think in real layman terms, sustainability is the idea of being able to use something, whatever it is, and it not getting used up. So do you know, like there's, you know, they do a lot of this in forestry now. So if in parts of like Norway, Sweden and Denmark, where they produce a huge amount of wood that people use to build houses in Europe and things like that, and obviously furniture and whatever, they actually have forests that are thriving, because what they do is when they cut down a tree that they're going to use to build a house, they have to plant 3 more of them in its place. And so that way they're using the wood sustainably. So they're always replanting, they're always regrowing, they're never they don't have diminishing supplies. So that would be an idea or a concept behind sustainability. Okay, so it's been able to use something without it being used up, which obviously we haven't been very good at with using fossil fuels, because fossil fuels take millions of years to develop or be produced, or so fossil fuels are just fossils, literally compressed dead animals, and people, I'm sure. And they're just compressed under loads and loads and loads of earth over millions and millions of years, and then they turn into fossil fuels. So the rate we're using them up, we're nowhere near giving them another million years to form. So that is not using them sustainably, because they will not sustain, they will be gone. Okay, so that's sustainability. I put this in here because this is the actual Junior Cert specification. Students should be able to evaluate how humans contribute to sustainability through extraction, use, disposal and recycling of materials. So that's what you have to be able to do. And there's a couple of bits here around sustainability, just kind of almost more definitions. But what I've told you is pretty much the idea. Like, a process or state can be maintained at a certain level for as long as is wanted. Long-lived and healthy wetlands and forests are examples. So I gave you the forest as an example. Sustainability is the endurance of systems and processes, and will allow future generations to benefit from the resources of our planet, so that we're not using them up. They will be there for our kids and our kids' kids, and so on. So the next bit here kind of goes on. I've talked about all of these, but like forestry, mining, the oil industry and fracking. So these are just ways, I suppose, that in the past we haven't done it very well, but companies these days are improving, because there's an awful lot of consumers out there, people like you and me, who won't buy certain products if we know that they weren't mined sustainably, or if they weren't we know they're cutting down trees in the rainforest and all they're doing is leaving it bare, then we won't buy that product because it wasn't farmed sustainably. Okay, so this, you can read through these yourselves, these are not hugely important, but forestry has been a big problem because we're cutting down loads and loads and loads of trees. We need the trees, it says it here, I think. The amount of carbon dioxide being removed by photosynthesis. So the trees take carbon dioxide out of our atmosphere, which is good because we don't want to breathe it. And then they turn that carbon dioxide into oxygen, which obviously is great because we do need to breathe that. So for a very, very, very long time, if you needed a tree to build a house, or you needed a tree to build some furniture, you just cut down that tree. But then as the population grew, that became unsustainable, as in we would have no trees left. So now an awful lot of companies have started doing what I said: when you cut one down, you plant a couple in place. Ireland are actually right at the forefront of that. We do that in our forests. Mining is another one. So there's an awful lot of raw materials that are mined or extracted from the ground. Again, huge population, huge demand. So it says here the demand for mined materials is increasing. That's down to our consumption as a population, as a population of Earth. Mining uses huge amounts of energy, huge amounts of water in the process. And then depending on where you're mining, for the most part, there will be some form of negative effect on the surrounding ecosystem. So again, mining companies are changing their ways. You have now what are called, it says that they're sustainable mines. They make positive contributions to the communities in which it operates. There's huge issues now with, if you want to mine, even just there's a local site here where somebody wanted to build apartments, and they wanted to go down into the ground to build like a 3-story underfloor car park. And in order to do it, they had to rehome a load of bats that lived there because they would disturb that ecosystem. That was their ecosystem. And the removal of the bats was colossal money. Like, I don't know what it was, like 50 or 100,000, something you would never think to associate with it. But that was part of the deal. So yeah, you can build your apartments, but you can only build them if you rehome the bats safely. So it's this type of thing that is going on now. The oil industry, so again, feel free to read it, but essentially this process here is called fractional distillation. Does it say it somewhere? Yeah, here. Fractional distillation. So what we have is crude oil. So you can see here, heated crude oil goes in. That's so they heat it up and they turn it into a vapor. So it's like, you know, heating water enough that it will boil. They heat it enough so that it will evaporate and turn into a vapor. And then essentially what they do is they let it cool down. So the hottest stuff is here, and that you can see over here, like that. It's bitumen that's the stuff, like the kind of tarmac stuff that goes on roads and roofs. And then when it cools a bit more, you can get the fuel for ships and power. It cools a bit more, you get fuel for cars, and so on and so forth. Okay, so at different temperatures, the crude oil is kind of boiled off, and they take the product and use it to like make a lot. I mean, plastic is made this way. I don't know, is plastic there? Bottled gas fuel for cars. No, but plastic is made from crude oil. So like a huge amount of materials that we rely upon using this process from crude oil. And you know, I suppose I think the issues with plastics are well documented. You know, they don't biodegrade. As with a lot of the crude oil products, they don't biodegrade. So we're in trouble because we consume an awful lot of plastic, and there's nowhere for it to go. There's nothing that we can do with it. And so it's, you know, it's polluting our oceans, it's killing sea life, you know, and there's such a demand for it that obviously it's going to continue to be produced. So what we're currently trying to do is reduce that demand. I think it talks here about, the plastic bag levy was brought in Ireland. That was to reduce, that was like an attempt to reduce plastics. I think most of us now would kind of, well, I certainly would, I'd move away from, like, you know, just a plastic bottle of water. I try to have my bottle that I use every day and I just fill it up. Things like that, like trying to buy products that don't have a huge amount of plastic on them. I know a lot of supermarkets, like in the vegetable section, are moving towards paper bags, things like that. So yeah, it's again well documented, the issues that we're having around plastics. Fracking is it's kind of like it's a drilling process, I suppose, as opposed to a mining process. But essentially what they do is they inject water and sand and then other chemicals. Where is that? Here. The water, sand and other chemicals are injected at high pressure, and that allows the gas to flow out. So fracking is a process to get natural gas. It's how we get it's not the only process of getting natural gas. So you can, some of it happens more naturally, but fracking is where you literally drill into kind of bedrock. So you're drilling into the rock underneath the land, and you get it to crack or fracture, hence fracking. And then you drive in these chemicals, and the pressure that you drive them in forces any gas out. It's massively controversial. They're having issues with it in Ireland because fracking is illegal in Ireland, and there is some fracking going on to get gas because obviously it's like drilling for oil, you know, you get good money for it. But again, like mining, huge amounts of water. The environmental costs here are massive. A lot of environmentalists say that there's carcinogenic chemicals. They would be chemicals that cause cancer. They escape around the fracking site, kind of like seep into the soil, into the water around the fracking site. Now, that's not 100% proven, but I think it's a lot of people hold that view. And then because you're drilling into kind of underneath the Earth's surface, there is issues with tremors and things like that. And then you have having a huge effect. Obviously, if there's chemicals seeping into the water and the soil around it, there's huge problems with the ecosystems and the animals living there, never mind the people who potentially drink that water. Disposal of non-recyclable, we were kind of talking about that with regard to the plastics. So again, for a long time this was just landfills. It's just bury it and move on. But people don't want landfills. It's very hard to find a site for a landfill because nobody wants a landfill near their house. Nobody wants a dump anywhere near their house. So there's a massive problem with that. Another option which they've been exploring lately is burning. So obviously burning is a problem because it releases carbon dioxide into the environment, but I suppose they're kind of counteracting that by using the energy in the incineration process. They're using it to produce steam, and then the steam powers a turbine and it generates electricity for local homes and businesses. So again, it's an attempt at sustainability. They have just, I think it doesn't say it here. So you're massively discouraged. I know, I remember growing up, my nanny used to take all her, I say recycling in inverted commas, but I didn't really know. It's she took all her cereal packets and stuff out of there and she'd burn them. And that is hugely detrimental. A fire at that temperature is hugely detrimental to the environment. But a lot of these disposal sites, they use really high temperatures, and that can kind of destroy a lot of the dioxides that could potentially be harmful. And then obviously they're using the energy from that burning process to then go on and power homes and stuff. So that's quite a positive, sustainable step. So yeah, all of that was talking about, I suppose, reduce, the concept of sustainability, either reuse or recycle. So again, I think most of you could answer this even if we didn't have this chat today, but we need to reduce the amount of waste going to our landfill sites, and we can do this buying products that do not have a lot of packaging. Like I was saying, that shops are moving towards that. Reduce waste of paper by reading newspapers and magazines online. Again, that there's a massive move that way anyway. Carpool, don't take the car if you don't have to. Cycle, more people in the car. Don't be going one person to a car. Use public transport, etc., etc. You've heard all this before. Reuse, this is where you do not throw things away, but try and find other uses for them. So we do that with plastic bags. We have bags for life, so you don't throw out your plastic bag. You use it and use it and use it until it won't work anymore. Bring your lunch to school in a lunchbox, or maybe plastic ice cream containers. Use shoe boxes, coffee jars, and other types of containers for storing things. So again, this is just an idea of reusing things, finding, there's a whole world of upcycling, they call it, which is where you take a top that you're never going to wear again and you turn it into a skirt that you're going to wear. You can do it with furniture. So you take furniture that's kind of, ready for the skip, and you give it a new lease of life. Okay, so there's a big drive towards this idea of reusing things that they may potentially have another life in them. And then recycle. So if a product ends up in a landfill site, its atoms are no longer useful, but it is recycled. The atoms can remain useful for longer. Recycling items are putting them through a process that makes it possible to create new products. So rather than just taking them and dumping them and letting them sit in the landfill to be buried and, I say break down, but most of them won't. You can recycle a product so that, I know the paper I buy for my printer is recycled paper, so it was paper before, and then it was taken and it was recycled into paper again, which is great. It means then you're not extracting new resources through mining or crude oil or whatever, and that energy is not being used, which is great. It's obviously not going to cost the money whatever. I mean, it's definitely going to cost some money because there's a process in turning it from old shredded paper into new paper that I can print on. But you're not, in order to like extract it and transport it, and like that's big money. The kind of later processes of producing a product is a little bit cheaper, and then obviously less rubbish, so you're not going to have stuff from the landfill sites. Okay, so that's it. That's the chapter, and like I said, you probably knew most of that already. So take down a few notes. Like I said, the main focus is on sustainability. So almost every company, business in the world is making a move to more sustainable methods and ideas. So it's important that you know what sustainability is and some idea of, like, you know, how the forestry industry are making an effort to improve their ways, etc. And then the idea of reduce, reuse, recycle, and why we do it, which again links back into sustainability. Okay, so like I said, no homework, so take down your notes and get working on your revision. All right, and I'll talk to you Thursday, I think is when we have class.